A new Tolkien book in 2022? Finally some good news. The Fall of Númenor by Brian Sibley just released in Europe at the 10th of November 2022. In the US it comes at the 15th of November. Today we'll look into it a bit and try to find out what it is, if it's any good and for whom it might be interesting. I'm Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games, and I mostly cover Tolkien's Lord of the Rings related writings on this channel. If you are interested into reading a few pages of The Fall of Númenor already, I link an extract of it in the video description. Some bookstores have it linked as well. Also, I bought the book and the digital version of it myself. The main title of the book is The Fall of Númenor, so one could assume it's just about the tragic story of this realm of men on their star-shaped island in the Second Age in Tolkien's universe. But it's much more than that, and its extended title hints at that: The Fall of Númenor and Other Tales from the Second Age of Middle-earth. It's not only about Númenor, but about the complete Second Age, though the realm of Númenor is interwoven into the Second Age with a lot of complexity. I would argue almost all big events in the Second Age have to do with it in some way. To help our imagination a little bit, the fantastic Alan Lee added many illustrations to it. He is widely known for his art among Tolkien fans. I guess most people have seen his imaginations in the form that he was, together with John Howe, a concept artist for Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. In this context, for completeness sake, I want to also mention Ted Naismith, who was not working on the films, though he was asked, but his art for sure gave Peter Jackson and his team some inspirations as well. For people curious, we see mostly pencil-drawn black and white illustrations of Alan Lee for this book, but also some colored ones. There are overall a lot of them, about 70 in total if I counted right, and 14 are colored, which I appreciate a lot. It's nice to see some images along with all the names. The book is structured in a very familiar way. If you have a copy of The Lord of the Rings with the appendices, you might know Appendix B, which consists of two timetables, one for the Second Age and one for the Third Age, where the story of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings plays in. For The Fall of Númenor, Brian Sibley took this timetable of the Second Age, it's also published in the book itself, and expanded every entry with a selection of texts from Tolkien, using almost all sources available. The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings plus appendices, The Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, Letters of Tolkien, The History of Middle-earth book, and even Nature of Middle-earth, which was just released September 2021. So for those who ask, are there new texts of Tolkien in The Fall of Númenor that were previously unpublished? No. And this gives you potentially an idea what this book is. It's a carefully curated collection of Tolkien's texts and extracts of those brought into an order that aligns well with the timetable of the Second Age, the Tale of Years, from Appendix B of The Lord of the Rings. In interviews, Brian Sibley called himself more of a storyteller than an academic, and that is something very important to understand here. To give you a bit of context, Tolkien only published 2 novels playing inside his created mythology in his lifetime. The Hobbit, published 1937, and the 3 books of The Lord of the Rings, published 1954 to 55. Lord of the Rings was written as one book though. In the background, throughout his whole life, even before he started working on The Hobbit, he worked on creating his own mythology, originally for England, but one could argue this shifted later a bit. Still, he wrote mythology. This was later supposed to become the Silmarillion. He sadly never completed it, and his son Christopher composed it out of what he has written already and published it posthumously, with the intent to make it a consistent book that fits perfectly to Lord of the Rings and expands it, explaining many of its lore implications. For that, he had to sometimes select texts that existed in numerous versions or ignore later ideas that were not completed yet or simply contradicted The Lord of the Rings, because he probably did not want to make changes to Lord of the Rings besides changing a name or two for consistency's sake, like changing the name Finarfir to Finarfin around 1977. Of course, both mean the same character. After that, Christopher Tolkien started to curate and publish almost all of his father's notes, essays and texts related to the Lord of the Rings universe. Of course, with his invaluable comment and knowledge of the matter. He even dated the writings of his father, and his approach was, in most books he published, quite academic. As a result, if you want to know about the Second Age specifically, you had text snippets about it in 8 to 9 different books, plus that in some cases those snippets existed in several versions that contradict each other. As you can imagine, it's a lot of work forming a basic storyline out of this, and Brian Sibley has done this work for his book, The Fall of Númenor. So if you ever wanted to read about the complete history of the Second Age of Middle-earth without buying 8 different books and study them meticulously, slowly piecing a story together out of them, then The Fall of Númenor has you covered. And if you want to learn more about each text extract published in it, then you find footnotes that source where the original text in full length can be found. A minor thing that I would have preferred in this context is that the notes were printed at the end of each date section instead of the end of the book. In the digital version it's linked and you can easily skip back and forth by simply clicking on the note number. In the physical copy I would have preferred if it was like in the Nature of Middle-earth, where each chapter has its own notes section, so you don't have to search for the notes at the end of the book in context of the chapter, or the dates as in The Fall of Númenor. Each date that is covered starts the numbering with 1, so you need to know the date to find the note. I guess it's like that because it might be better for just reading it like a story, so I see the reason for it, just a minor thing and personal preference. So for whom is the book? I think it's good for new people and people who are maybe a bit intimidated looking into the existing books with a more academic approach. The Fall of Númenor is of course not a novel, but like an interesting history book with some additional information. As Tolkien scholar Carl F. Hostetter did it with The Nature of Middle-earth, Tolkien scholar Brian Sibley as well printed Tolkien's own words in a bigger font size and the commentary in a smaller one, so that you can always know whose words you are reading. For completeness sake, in the commentary, Sibley sometimes quotes Tolkien as well. Here the font size remains small because the commentary is outside the main narrative, but it's, as far as I have observed it, always clear that it's a quote from Tolkien then. I respect that a lot and loved that detail about The Nature of Middle-earth book already, which is though a far more academic work. So Sibley composed more of a history book which includes many interesting details, even small ones like the Green Bough of Return or the peculiar dancing bears of Númenor we learned about last year in Nature of Middle-earth. He also includes some interesting background information in the notes at times, like the origin of the word Wurgil that Tolkien used a few times in his writings. I think Sibley tried to mainly make The Fall of Númenor compatible with The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion. As a result, some edge cases are missing in the book, like the arrival of Glorfindel and the Blue Wizards in the Second Age. Several versions exist here, and Lord of the Rings might indirectly contradict this, even though it was the last version Tolkien wrote in his life, published in Peoples of Middle-earth. So composing a somewhat consistent story out of all of Tolkien's writings comes always at a price. In this way, it's similar to what Christopher Tolkien experienced when he had to compose the Silmarillion. The Silmarillion of his father would have been a very different book, but it was the best Christopher could possibly do. Brian Sibley, as he admitted himself in an interview, had it easier because he did not need to transcribe, date and order the texts of Tolkien anymore, but still he had to make difficult decisions what version will be in his book and what version will be not. As a result, this is Brian Sibley's Second Age in a way. Canon for some cases in the Second Age is a highly complex topic, but to be fair, he hints towards this problem in the book, and with citing the sources, everyone can look deeper into the complexity of this himself. Still, that should be kept in mind. Some decisions might not be popular among some fans. For example, a text is included in which Amros is Galadriel's and Celeborn's son. In later texts, he becomes the son of Amdir. Another name, Malgalad, appears in one version and he has the role of Amdir, though it's not mentioned that Amros is his son in this one, and we find these texts also in Fall of Númenor, which potentially contradict each other. The whole timeline of Galadriel is a really complex and problematic topic, and Brian Sibley had to construct this out of the existing texts, though those texts are probably not fully compatible with each other. Another example is the parentage of High King Gil-galad. In the Fall of Númenor, he's the son of Fingon, because this is also in the Silmarillion, and in one text Sibley used, this is implied as well, the letter of Gil-galad to Tar Mineldur. However, Christopher Tolkien called this later an editorial mistake by his side for the Silmarillion. Of course, it was once the idea of his father, but he abandoned it at some point. As a result, the book goes or has to go with this outdated version to fit to the Silmarillion without generating confusion. Still, I think this is an important point to understand. The Fall of Númenor tries to be compatible with the three main books, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion. Not every hardcore fan will like when his favorite version of these stories are not included or ignored, but I guess for this you really have to dive into the more academic works. This is by no means a mistake by Sibley, but simply the nature of many texts outside of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and Brian Sibley hints at this in his notes as well. People should be just aware that this new book does not include all the versions, leaves some versions out to fit better to the main books, and that there is in many cases no real canon with these work-in-progress texts that are the source for a lot of what happens in the Second Age. In a way, the Fall of Númenor is in parts Brian Sibley's interpretation of the Second Age, and some might not like some details of this particular interpretation, but it's a competently done interpretation, and Sibley is 100% transparent with this. You just have to look into the notes. As said, I would have preferred a different position of the notes. One thing I also would have wished for would be an index with page numbers, as we know it from, for example, the Silmarillion. That is sadly missing in the Fall of Númenor and would have been helpful for some of us, though the chronological structure of the book helps with finding things already. To finally answer the question for whom the book is, I guess it's a fantastic starting point for new people who want to dive deeper into Tolkien's lore of the Second Age, especially after maybe seeing the Rings of Power show, which also plays in the Second Age, though does a lot of changes. If they want to go deeper into the rabbit hole, then the book also hints at where to find more. For people who already know all the Second Age versions well and are into more academic works already, the book maybe offers not that much due to the lack of new, so far unpublished texts. It for sure is nice to have almost all the texts about a certain time in one place, and even having the sources cited for them with page numbers. I think the Númenor sections are competently done as far as I can tell, and of course also here Sibley had to work around some of Tolkien's date inconsistencies and little mistakes that existed here and there, of course with further explanations in the notes. And I know a lot of fans are also collectors and want that book on their shelf anyway, but I think it's nice to have again a book for potentially new people interested in Tolkien, and I think for those the book might work pretty well. And the best part, it uses the texts written by Tolkien himself with just a small bit of commentary and editing. So for those, my full recommendation. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little review of The Fall of Númenor. I might link an affiliate link in the description in case you use Amazon and want to buy the book, though I recommend supporting your local bookstores. Oh, I forgot to mention the book has a tailband in case you wonder. Feel free to let me know if you are interested in the book or how you like this review in the comments, and maybe press the like button and subscribe if you are into Tolkien lore. Currently, I work on finishing my extremely detailed with Elrond video series. Part 2 also covers almost all of the Second Age, including all kinds of versions Tolkien has written, but don't look at the length of it. I also plan on going through Galadriel's history and explore all or most of the versions Tolkien wrote. One part is already out and will be continued later. Maybe check that out as well. This review might also be available in German on the German channel. All my stuff is linked in the description, but enough talking. Again, thank you for watching and goodbye.